Hi, everybody. Pedro here. And today I would like to talk about something that perhaps might be relevant or more relevant for those of you that, have a career for many years, perhaps. And, you have a certain level of success in that career, but at the same time, something feels off. And perhaps you are considering, getting into business and at the same time you feel that it doesn't make sense because you have this success, it's sort of like a stable job, but you feel that something is off at the same time, right? So this is sort of like a tough position that I also find myself in, a few years ago, let's say about 5 years ago. Because what happens in my case um, was, I was very successful at my past career, and I achieved that success very early in my career, in that career as well. And that career, by the way, was born out of me stepping out of a previous career. So I did a little bit of changes here and there in my life, and that was one of them. But in any case, I stayed in that career for like 10, 12 years. And my business is attached to that career as well. But when I was in that career, although first of all it has to do with an artistic background, so of course there's a lot to do with the ego, and that's totally fine. And that's actually what's needed for you to thrive in the career like that. But at the same time I felt that something was off for me, and this varies from person to person. The reason of why I felt off might have been a combination of you know time in their career. It might be a combination of that associated with my age, um, my changes, my changes. Say for example, when I became a dad, for example. Um, Although that came later, I have to say. But you might feel sort of like the same kind of situations in here for yourself. But as I was saying, for me, something felt off as well. I could not really say what it was, but you know, I felt that something I could have like a different life. That's basically what I'm saying. And I didn't know exactly what would be, how to build it, because how can I build something that I don't know exactly what it is, right? But in any case, when it came to the career part, um, you know, from the eyes of a lot of other people, I have made it, right? I achieved that level of success early on. I had like a good salary, I had all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, deep down, I felt that something was off. Not all the time, but increasingly off over the years. And so, I knew that there will come a point in which something has to change, but I don't know exactly, what it was. It was not like a complete dissatisfaction about like what I was doing, because I was also having fun, but there was something was off. Something was not like congruent with the way that I wanted to move on with my life. And so what I realized over time, and I think this came in later, to be honest with you, is that just because you're good at what you do, profession wise, that doesn't mean that you have the purpose or freedom that you'd like to have, for many different reasons, right? And what happens also is that people confuse success in their careers with status, okay, but not fulfillment. So basically, what I mean is they equate success with status. Now I have this role, but that role might not mean, necessarily speaking, like a great deal of fulfillment deep inside. And I think that was sort of like what was happening, increasingly. As I said before, it was not like overnight, but increasingly, in my past career. And perhaps this is related to how you feel as well. So there was also a point in which this was screaming a little bit louder and louder. And then I realized that I felt sort of like stuck. Like, how can I move on, do something different? I didn't know, right? So I had to be sort of like almost pushed into something new, which was, as I said in other videos, that's when COVID happened, in which at that time, strangely enough, I felt like a very, um, I would say, calmness at the same time that the world was like in a panic mode because nobody knew. But for me, that was like a realization that everybody's feeling the same. Everybody's in the same situation, independently of where they are in the world, independently of what their situation, professionally speaking, is, independently of what their role is, independently of what the industry they belong. Everybody's in the same boat. So for me, it was sort of like, okay, everyone is leveled. So now I have the freedom to do something else, right? Because I'm not missing out on anything. Because that was like one of my biggest problems was missing out on this or missing out on that. And so at that time, I felt a little bit of a great sense, I would say, of calmness because of that reason. Because in my mind, everyone is in the same boat, pretty much, right? And in my particular case, in my industry, one of the drivers for me to feel that dissatisfaction was the constant grinding when it comes to like putting like a lot of hours, time and time and time again, and also some frustration about the fact that things could not change whatsoever, um, because that was basically like how things would go. But I start developing a different way of doing things, but I was just like one within a whole industry. So of course, my leverage regarding that kind of stuff was some, but was not the one that I would like to have. And so basically, when COVID happens, I felt that calmness that I said before, and I took that as sort of like an opportunity for me to leverage my influence to that industry and to basically give power to the people that are inside that perhaps feel sort of like the same, and give them power on how they can achieve something different from themselves. And that's basically what happens. And those specific reasons were the drivers for me to basically get into business. It was sort of like the mission of giving helping people, but giving them power, or through that help giving them power to change certain aspects about their lives that I knew that they were not satisfied with, because I was feeling the same and I had many years of experience, like, um, towards the end, of course, more than 10 years, as I said before. And so I knew like exactly what were the pain points about that specific thing, right? That was common to a lot of other people. So if you find yourself in a similar situation, you can do the same, because you know your industry really well. You know exactly the pain points about what that means, how does that feel, and how would that feel if certain things would be solved, right? So you can be that person towards others, right? So that might be a way that you can perhaps think about getting into business, like basically being a coach for these people, knowing exactly very well, all the pain points about what this means. I mean, I'm talking about, being a coach can be a course, can be, a consulting service, can be whatever. What I mean by this is using your own experience, in a very deep way, to basically use that as leverage to now try to solve the problem for other people, or for an industry, or for a company. You know what I mean? um, Now I understand that you might be feel lost lost about like, how can I do that, you might have some ideas, but you feel lost, and that's basically how I can help you. By the way, if you want this help, just there's a link in the description, click there, and then let's book a call and see if we can work with each other. But also, what is important is to get a little bit of clarity, if you feel like this, a little bit of clarity of what are the things that really move you forward, as opposed to things that are basically taking all your energy. So there's something that is not new by any means, which is called ikigai, and it's sort of like an exercise that can help you try to find your zone of genius, in terms of like the things that you love, the things that you're good at, the things that you think the world needs, and basically the things that you can be paid for. So when you have the intersection of all of this, you will find, at the middle of everything, you'll find the purpose. I'll leave the link in the description so you can do this exercise. But when you transition your expertise into a structured business that aligns with your lifestyle, and aligns with your purpose, and aligns with your mission, then you'll find a sense, natural sense of fulfillment and purpose about like what you're doing all of a sudden almost, right? Because there's, as human beings, I think there's definitely a natural predisposition of all of us to help each other if we want. And there's a satisfaction that you get from that, even if we're not talking about money, just, the fact that you're helping someone else, right? Now, you can, of course, scale this to a proper business, and then, life can feel really good, right? It needs structure, it needs, a lot of things. That's, again, one of the things that I can potentially help you with because I did that for myself. But I'm just saying that just the fact that you're helping someone, there's a sense of satisfaction that is innate to all of us as human beings. Now, if you want to focus on the dissatisfaction that you are feeling currently, if you are in this position like I was, know that that's not a flaw. That's sort of like more of a signal that something needs to change. The more you leave it unaddressed, the more it will grow, perhaps, and nobody will do that for you. So that's the sort of like the realization that I had at that time for myself. Like, if I don't do anything about this, nobody else will. It's either me or no one, right? And I was also, I was at that particular time conscious about, my age, not, for the age itself, but the fact that the more you grow, perhaps the less energy you'll have to do certain transitions. Then your context on the familiar level also comes into play. And so this is sort of like the things that can also come into play in your mind when it comes to something like this, if you are feeling like this, like I was, right? So know that it's about action rather than just delaying and delaying and delaying, hoping that dissatisfaction will change. Because the truth is, there's a lot of life out there. There's a lot of different realities that perhaps you're not even aware of, right? That means like a way more fulfilling, way more profitable kind of lifestyle, that if others were able to achieve it, there's nothing that the world is conspiring against you to make you not be able to achieve those things. Okay? So this is the type of stuff that I wanted to talk to you about, giving you my experience when I went through something like this, and giving you, some sort of like inspiration, perhaps, that if you feel like this, you can change your life as well in the same way that I did, in the same way that a lot of other people did over the years, and it's never too late. Okay? And the biggest risk, by the way, about like all of this, because I know that this is something that comes into your mind most likely, the biggest risk is not to perhaps try to change. The risk is to just stay in the same situation, and what you're gonna find is exactly the same dissatisfaction, exactly that same lack of alignment, all that kind of stuff. So, there's like this psychological component that is a big thing about like everything that I'm talking about. But I believe, in my opinion, that's the biggest risk. It's not so much trying. By the way, if you try to go into business and you are concerned about like leaving your job, you don't have to leave your job to start a business. You can start both of them at the same time, and then when the business starts growing, if it makes sense, you leave your job, because you already have this going. um, you can take like a more drastic approach, which is, I'm going to leave completely, I cannot stand this anymore, and I'm going to go all in into this. There's better chances that you're going to find success in this way, but you don't have to go in this way. There's not only one way of doing things. There's multiple ways of doing things. Different people choose different things because that's what's most suitable for them as a human being. That's what's most suitable for them for their current life situation and life stage. But it's possible, totally possible, that you transition from a work that you're not satisfied with to now to something that is way more aligned to the things that you want to do, the things that you can provide to others, and the satisfaction that you gain naturally with it, and the money as well. Okay, because that perception about like money will most likely change completely, because what you're going to gain when it comes to money, okay, if you go into business, it's going to be most likely way more than what you have currently in your job, especially if you're not satisfied, because when you consider these two things, then it doesn't make sense. Okay, so I hope you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one. All right, bye bye, have a good one.